Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Growing Up Alien. Today, I have a really interesting video I'd like to share because I think it's critical to look back at some of these contact cases from I call it the golden age of experiencers, where they were having physical contacts. And in fact, when we look at a case like the friendship case, the Amicizia, which is what we're going to talk about today, as an introduction to um, just, unparalleled evidence and footage captured in two books by Stefano Breccia. One is the Amicizia, the friendship case, and well as mass contacts. This is the most. I've never read anything that is quite as well put together. I mean, it is a translation from the Italian, so you do have a little bit of glitches in there, but you have comprehensive information in both mass contacts and Amicizia of how the craft are built, how they fly, that Italian pilots were actually flying these UFOs, whole sections on that. So I think as an intro, it would be nice to kind of like get a documentary type feel, and that's what I found today concerning well, they're not going to show all of them. There's at least 200 people in Ascoli Piceno and Pescara region that had contact with these visitors. They call them the W56s. The name W56 does not refer to any sort of a race or group or planet. It refers to several different races of extraterrestrials, humanoids, that were based there in Pescara. And they just came up with a term for them, a W56, because the contact began in 1956. Now, the W56s themselves told the people there that they had been there for quite, hundreds of years, and many of them were actually born there. Some had married with other Earth people. They have children, and of course, they consider themselves Earth people. Unfortunately, the base was destroyed, and this corroborates and coincides with what Bob Renault was telling us concerning the base he was visiting in Massachusetts, the Mass Corps base, which was in the Berkshire, was and is in the Berkshire. So Bob Renault was a ham radio operator that was able to get contact through his radio with the Kurundai people. And they have a base, of course, in the Berkshires. And he would go to that base. What he noticed um, somewhere in the beginning of the 80s, during that time, the base had become militarized. This parallels what we saw in Italy with the actual destruction of the base in Pescara. So um, it also plays along with what looks like an increasing uh, violent takedown, consolidation, when even a lockdown of Earth right during this time period, because this is when you start to see the shift between the original physical contact experience, Howard Menger, Adamski, Albert Coe, those people, Billy Meyer, with the shift to the no longer um, utilization of the physical contact with the what we call psychic or astral contact experiencers that happened after this, into the 70s, 80s, and certainly into the 2000s. My own contact experience was physical as a child. It shifted to the astral. There was a big gap of time where seemed like no contact, which is fairly common amongst other experiencers. And then the resurgence of the astral information and contract, and then just last week, actual physical contact again. Physical contact will continue. As of now, that could change. So I don't, we can't just assume that we're going to be moving forward. That would be great, but this is a military operation. And people have to look at this as it's not an entertainment thing. I know a lot of folks want to make it that, which is why I like to go back to the original stories and texts and video of these people pre-1980, because you're not getting a lot of infiltration, in my opinion, from the regressive side. They also explain, and Anesthesia with Stefano Brescia's written documentaries as well as his interviews. Stefano Breccia has since passed away. There are a few Amicizia contacts, I believe, that are still living. I'm not 100% sure which ones, but yeah, they have the intel, and it was never publicized or turned into a celebrity thing. And I think that's particularly critical when we're trying to deduce what's actually going on here on Earth. For me, what's important is trying to understand what we're here for, what's being done, what is actually going on behind the scenes, who is involved, and where can we go with that? Because that's probably the number one question most of us have is what the hell are we doing here? So, anyway, I want to screen share this. I think it's a great video. And we'll play that. There we go.
Newspapers talked about it. People wanted to know. But nobody could penetrate the mystery. What was going on? Strange flying machines were plowing the skies of Italy. It was the 50s. Some people took incredible photos. Others were frightened and shouted, "They're here! They're among us!" While still others believed the aliens had come to help. But who were they? Where were they from? Above all, what did they want? Many knew but kept quiet. A mystery that has remained as such for decades. A secret now revealed. Friendship. The incredible story of mass contact between humans and extraterrestrials.
Some of the writing from the books from the W56.
Until recently, the phenomenon of contactism, or the deliberate...
If you go back to the bell.
Friendship. The incredible story of mass contact.
If you watch the way that bell moves, I'll play that again. It might look fake. Well, it looks like it's on a string. It's actually not. As you bring these craft, if they're still in warp, down close to, there's Jesse's been all excited here. When you start to fly these craft lower, they become very unstable, and that's when you're going to start to see that, swinging type action. Again, it's verified across many, not only Adamski, but also videos from the Friendship Case. Also, of course, the classic ones from Billy Meyer of Semiasi's beam ship. When we look at evidence, and it's all about evidence, you have to have the evidence. That's the thing. And analyze footage and be willing to say, hey, this footage looks accurate, and we've had it analyzed, it's accurate, and this footage isn't accurate, but that's okay. We'll keep moving forward. There are, having a mistake or videotaping or filming something that might be a satellite or whatever, that's fine. It's okay. We know that these things exist, right? I mean, the amount, the volume of footage of actual UAPs, they call them now, is astounding. But this type of, swinging, waving kind of action in a craft, as well as any warping of the craft, that's all stuff you would want to see when it is in Earth's atmosphere and looks like it's going to land. So oftentimes these craft will often drop down kind of like orientation devices. You'll also see that happen as well. And that was witnessed during the Amichisi event as well. So
between humans and extraterrestrials. Until recently, the phenomenon of contactism, or the deliberate encounter repeated over time between men and evolved extraterrestrial entities, was believed to involve only a few chosen individuals, or contactees. Many of them went down in history. George Adamski, Howard Menger, Eugenio Siragusa, just to name a few. All of them faithfully abided by this cliché. But in 2007, something happened that would change the cards on the table. Stefano Breccia, an engineer from Marche living in Abruzzo, published some startling papers that seemed to reveal the story of repeated direct encounters between more than 100 people and extraterrestrial beings living in numerous secret bases on our planet. The main figure of the event told by Breccia is the writer Bruno Sammachicha. The case is said to have taken place mainly in and around Pescara. It would all begin in 1956 and would last for many years. The film clips and photographs that have emerged so far are of considerable interest, but even more extraordinary are the testimonies of the individuals involved. Everyone called this story friendship, and that is the name that has come down to us today. Thanks to Stefano Breccia's courage, one of the most awe-inspiring sagas in ufology has come to light. It wasn't an easy decision to decide to make it known.
It all started from an idea by Bruno Sammarciccia. He'd been thinking about writing down his experiences and then asked me to be the one to do it. And so I was at his house for a month to record his stories. Then I put everything together.
Besides granting his dear friend's wishes, Breccia had set himself another objective.
One reason is to hope that it might work as bait to encourage other people in the group to come forward.
Gaspare de Lama and his wife Mirella are among those still alive today who were involved in the friendship events and who accepted Breccia's invitation to come forward. They now live on the shores of Lake Como. Gaspare admired Stefano's courage to expose himself so directly, despite being a well-known figure in science and academia.
He had no hesitation about exposing himself, and I admired him for that.
E quindi il fatto di espormi e di dire la mia
And so coming out and talking about my experience becomes easy for me because it gives me great joy.
gioia di
So actually what happened during that time period, and also happened directly with Stefano Breccia, and you saw similar stories with the Umites, and this is in the 1950s. This is very important. Dates matter in these kinds of situations. So the different types of, I would imagine, ETs belonging to the Alliance were desperately trying to contact people here. And of course, they had to learn the languages in order to do so. This was mentioned to Bob Bruneau with the Corundine, like, oh my God, we got to figure out English, how to get a way to learn English, how to get it. And then, they were telling him that specifically so that they could contact people on this planet and warn them of what the hell is going down, particularly during the nuclear age, and that we were, heading towards disaster and the extinction of our race. That's what they were trying to do, and are still trying to do, and that's why you're here. To try to convince the race on this planet not to kill itself. I don't know how successful we are, but time will tell. They seem to have a problem. Anyway, the Omites were able to learn Spanish, and they were contacting people in Spain. You also saw contact from the Omites in Brazil and those areas in Central America and all that, anywhere they're Spanish speaking. So they would send letters, largely to professionals. And of course, most of those letters were thrown out. Now, what the hell? Most people didn't buy into that. But Stefano Breccia got a letter, and it was in Spanish, because they didn't realize that Spanish and Italian were two different things. But of course, Stefano could read Spanish, and he received a letter, and he believed it, and he kept on to it. And it was actually from, well, who would become the W56s, trying to contact many. And as you saw here, this fellow was a prominent scholar. That's who they were contacting during this time period in order to, they figured, reach out to certain individuals who might be likely to take them up on it in order to spread the word that, hey, you guys are in big trouble.
The joy of being able to tell people something that can help them understand more, or make their doubts grow or disappear, or strengthen their belief.
Gaspare de Lama became a fan of ufology in the late 40s, and, together with his wife, sought a path to greater awareness. Even Gaspare's mother took part in the events.
Gaspare, his mother Zita, and I had finally achieved our goal, which was to get to know them. We were hoping for an experience with teachers who could help us improve.
In the friendship story, Samachicha called the beings by the name of W56. They weren't a single race, but a group of extraterrestrial beings coming from different parts of the universe. Although they looked like humans, there were considerable differences in height, which ranged from 1 to 6 meters. The first encounter took place in April 1956. Bruno Samachicha was there, along with his two friends, Giancarlo and Giulio.
Bruno said that an old friend had given him this parchment because Bruno collected antiques. And while looking at it, they noticed it was a map of the castle above Ascoli Piceno at Roccapiglia. It seemed to be a kind of...
So one of the entrances to the bases is in Roccapiglia, which is in Ascoli Piceno, and I freaked out when I was reading the book, and I told Frank right away, I said, Frank, we're from Ascoli Piceno. And Roccapiglia is my grandfather was up there with the sheep, so I still have relatives in Ascoli Piceno. So yeah, that was like, I just couldn't. I'm like, well, okay, that I wonder if there's any connection in my family originally up in that area to some of these W56s, and if there was any interbreeding to create a certain DNA pattern that they would need for future missions. I don't know, but it's my family is from Ascoli Piceno.
So they decided to go and take a look at the area. They went there more than once without ever finding anything in particular, until one night when they came across these people. At a certain point, these two came out from a path that runs around the castle, introduced themselves, and started to talk. One of them was particularly short, about 1 meter in height, and the other extremely tall, 2.5 meters, something like that.
So one guy was about 3.5 feet tall, and the other guy, one was 6 feet tall, but actually what they're showing in the picture, this guy was 12 feet. There's some of those guys are like 12 feet. So
as for the rest, they looked like normal people.
But what happened in that encounter? According to the eyewitnesses, the two aliens spoke perfect Italian. The thing that immediately struck them was the strong sense of love that emanated from these beings. The information they gave to Bruno, Giancarlo, and Giulio was awesome, to say the least. They said that Earth had been created for a positive purpose, and that man was turning everything into evil. But the morality level of humans was much lower than their own. They explained that this is a very critical moment in human history. Atomic weapons are capable of destroying the planet in a matter of minutes, a tremendous risk that could come to pass because of our low moral sense.
Yeah, this is the same stuff that was told to Adamski. This is the same stuff that was told to Billy Meyer and yada, Menger. Even the Vrillon thing that came out on the TV in England, it's all cookie cutter information. And well, it even goes back to Albert Coe when Albert was talking to Zret, and this huge, I don't know personally what they can really do, that the Terran race on this planet, and I don't think it's their fault. I think it was bred into them. That's again what we've been taught in Era. I take everything with a grain of salt. Don't just assume because information is coming for ETs that it's somehow gospel. It is not necessarily. So there is a violent aspect to the beings, and I like people who try to contradict that. Look around you. Look, the evidence to the violence of this race is everywhere. So I don't know how they're going to fix this, but the warning for the Terrans, and this goes way back to Albert Coe, that they have to stop being so competitive. They have to stop being so aggressive. They have to stop being so hateful and so tribal. I don't see that happening personally. Just again, look around you because the evidence is everywhere. That like I said, I try to keep some hopium that this race can be saved, but evidence proves, unfortunately, that it doesn't look likely, to be honest. But for sure, these warnings have been across all contacts. And it is the real problem here with this natural violent tendency of the race on this planet. It's why you're here. It's why we have the boots on the ground. It's why we've opened up all these different bases around the world, to try to, at this point, mitigate, I think, the destruction of the planet. That's my guess, because the ICC have that planned. The syndicate, if you want to call it that. People call it the cabal, whatever you want to call it. They've been addressing the extraterrestrials that not only are working here, but off planet, and they're pretty much on the idea that we will destroy this planet if you guys make a move. I still have all my faith in that they'll make a move to freeze any kind of catastrophic event. But like I said, I don't know what their plan is. I know they have the capacity to do that, but time will tell.
Their task was to ensure that the situation didn't get out of hand. They said they weren't here to conquer, as there was nothing to conquer. But everything stemmed from the need for love and respect, and that everything should be done in accordance. They knew Earth's history.
That's really the bottom line that the beings on this planet seem to have a really difficult time with, is that simplicity is the way forward. Love, family, and innocence. Love, family, and innocence. And as the W56s would beg the contacts in Italy, unity, unity, unity. And, well, didn't happen. And the base was blown up by the regressive factions that are working with the syndicate. So what they called them in the Amachizia is a CTR. So the CTR are a synthetic race, but they're a biological synthetic race. And there are biological synthetic races that you cannot tell the difference even after a necropsy or autopsy. Only a few visitor races can actually tell. So a synthetic race that is biological, what's the difference between a biological and a synthetic biological? A soul. So the actual biological being is in possession of and driven by a consciousness, a soul. The synthetics do not have this. Now you can breed, and they can interbreed. The synthetic biologics have conquered that. That's certainly something they can do. They can breed with those who have souls. And the CTRs are that, a synthetic race, but biological. And they are working. When you look at the ICC, the cabal, right? It's an interstellar organization. It's the syndicate. It's a very massive corporate conglomerate that has to do with war, that has to do with military, that has to do with gun running, mining operations, all sorts of commercial enterprises throughout different galaxies. They have a very service to self mindset. They largely work above the law, and they also work within galactic mercantile law. So oftentimes they're doing things that is allowed. Now the CFW, the Confederation of Worlds, which a lot of people call the Federation or Galactic Federation, names don't really matter. You're translating alien wording, and there are many federations, but there is a Confederation of Worlds, the CFW, the Federation. I'll just call it the Federation. And this race doesn't have a problem, this federation, excuse me, doesn't have a problem with colonization. So when there are groups that do colonization, and it's kind of a mind bender that the Federation doesn't have a problem with that, but they don't. They allow things to happen, even though it's the Federation that actually had a prime directive. They no longer have a prime directive. They haven't had a prime directive in a long time, because the Alliance convinced them that it's dumb and it doesn't work, because you were seeing colonization across many planets by this conglomerate that was meant to be nefarious, and also to build a massive military power in order to keep colonizing and spreading their nefarious agenda. And they had alliances with groups like the CTR, the Mitra, the Draco, some of the Greys, yada, yada, yada. We all know the story, okay? Bad news bears. Finally got that through to the Federation. So anyone who is telling you that within the past, oh my God, 90s, maybe 20 to 30 years that there is a prime directive, they are incorrect. There has not been a prime directive for a very long time. However, I suspect that these people who are talking about these kinds of things are not talking to the benevolent extraterrestrials. They are talking to mimics or phase-ins. They are talking to the cabal or the conglomerate, the syndicate. The syndicate is very good, and this syndicate has created mimic situations that not only confuse the extraterrestrials working in the Alliance and the Federation, but are still being used to confuse and to create agendas that are conglomerate agendas. That doesn't mean the people who are working under the syndicate, voodoo are bad people. You just have to use common sense that the idea of any single contact has really never been the case. What you're looking at is group operatives. So even though we look at, well, there was single contact between Menger and Adamski and you and me and all that, we are not operating as single individuals. We are operating as operatives in a wider military framework. There are no special contacts. There are no special organizations. There is only an overarching benevolent alliance, and it is called the Universal World Alliance. There is only an overarching federation. The federation and the alliance work together, and they work with other groups that are beneficial to the promotion of peace in these galactic realms. So,
and religions perfectly. They said they'd already been on Earth for many centuries, living at secret bases in various places on the planet. They preferred not to reveal themselves publicly because people weren't ready for the contact. They expected a positive return from their activity. Their goodness and their truth would be stronger than human doubts. When they left, it was almost 3 in the...
What happened? And they were saying they didn't want to make open contact for a couple of reasons. It's too dangerous because the cabal was growing. They didn't have backing, really, not until the 80s where things started to heat up. But ultimately, the Earth inhabitants would have not been intellectually capable of understanding some of these things for various reasons, largely the poisoning, the toxins that were given there. So your Terrans have a cognitive deficiency in that realm because they were fed and sprayed and given all these different things, and of course genetically bred to not have full control over executive function. And you can just walk around and see that. So, that was done on purpose. Obviously, nobody wants a very intelligent piece of livestock, do they? I mean, this is a race of slaves that the syndicate had colonized this planet and created, right? What happened then after was that the syndicate, the cabal, CIA, all these different organizations realized, and derp, right? They knew what the alliance had planned, as these W56s mentioned here in the contact, that they wanted to begin to have more infiltration into the Terran society to tell them and to warn them not only of the danger they were in, but of the extreme danger that was to come. So the syndicate knew of this, and they hijacked the propaganda campaign that the beneficial aliens were attempting. So that is your New Age movement. And that is all of your contact stories that happened in the 1980s and onward, where people were supposedly in contact and writing these massive books concerning Arcturians and Pleiadians and all that stuff, which was complete nonsense, sprinkled with some fact, and they always will do this. The cabal will always do this. It's not all fake. A lot of it is real. But they hijacked the story. They grabbed these people, a lot of your near-death experiencers, a lot of your psychics, a lot of your contactees from the period in the 80s onwards that were in physical contact and meeting with all these amazing beings, and they were writing books and creating clubs and all that kind of stuff. They were actually in contact with the syndicate. Now, they were likely meeting with extraterrestrials, but they were not the benevolent ones. They were extraterrestrials working for the intergalactic syndicate or the intergalactic cabal, the ICC. That's what has been happening since the 80s.
The extraordinary experience of friendship began at that very moment. The meetings between Bruno, Giancarlo, Giulio, and the W56, also known as the Friends, continued for several months. During frequent long walks on the beach in Pescara, they gave the humans a good deal of other information. Pietro was the name of the captain of the extraterrestrial group operating in Italy. Sigir, Sigis, Itao, Kenio, Sinas, Saju, Meradir, Romulus are some of the names that became common within friendship. They were invented by the humans because the W56 had a different concept for names. One of the most impressive facts regarded their bases. They said they had a number of them scattered around Italy and the world. Their most important European base was right in Italy, and one of the entrances was, in fact, at Roccopia.
The main one was the enormous base at the depths of the Adriatic, almost in contact with the continental shelf, which roughly ranged from Ortona to Rimini as the expanse of its longitude, and in latitude went from the middle of the Adriatic to the Apennines, with an upper limit of 300 meters. So vast that it was affected by normal weather. So at times it also rained inside. Then they had many smaller bases closer to the surface. There was one in Pineto, one in Ascoli, 3 around Pescara, one near Como, one in the Milan area, and so on. Many of them were genuine centers of support.
But the aliens also explained how they built their bases. In the stories told by Bruno, Giancarlo, and Giulio, you're immediately aware of the huge gap in scientific and technological development between humans and the Friends.
They weren't built by digging, but through a particular mechanism. They were able to compress material laterally. The soil would thicken into what would later become the walls of the base, and then the outer structure was formed by extremely dense and therefore extremely strong material. The funny thing was that it was very unstable, but it always had to be kept standing. All you had to do was flip a switch and everything returned to the initial state. So for them to open and close a base was a very commonplace operation.
The same system was used to create the entry corridors.
Even the bases closer to the surface didn't have stable entrances. When they had to enter, they opened a corridor and then closed it again.
And I can't stress enough how exciting these amicizia and mass contact texts are, because they give you very detailed information about the technology that the W56 is used. It's similar to the stuff that we use on ERA, and ET tech relies on understandings of molecular structure and the atomic structure, and that is how the walls, that's how they create the base, and how they can materialize an opening at will when you need it. And it has to do with understanding we're working in the materials on their atomic level, and that's how I'm going to do a separate video on how the Arahel build our ships and how the Amicizia people, the Friends, build their ships. It's different, but it's the concept is the same.
Aside from the facts related to friendship, the presence of secret extraterrestrial bases on our planet is a subject that scholars have long been aware of. Just as there have been numerous cases of contact throughout the world, like the one the American policeman named Herbert Schirmer described, which occurred in Ashland, Nebraska, on December the 3rd, 1967.
The experience took place in the United States to the policeman Shermer, who had a close encounter of the third kind with UFO entities and was allowed on board one of these UFOs. In the course of this encounter with these beings, they told him several things. He would be told that the pilots of UFOs on Earth have different bases of support, and they are both underground and below the seas.
In the case of friendship, Bruno Sammachichia was the leader, the main reference point.
La storia di W56 era cominciata con lui.
The story of the W56 had started with him. He knew the most since he'd been in the bases, had met them personally, was telepathic, was the one who held the strings, the one who decided. Not that he was.
So that is in the mass contacts text, where Stefano Breccia goes down to the bases as well. So they get to go inside. Bob Renault also spent quite a bit of time inside the bases, so you can kind of corroborate information there between Bob Renault and the friendship. And this fellow here was given quite a tour and shown how they live in these bases. So really cool stuff in these books. So much better than what's being told to you now, I think, in my opinion anyway.
The boss.
La capo non è simpatica, ma lo guardavamo.
The word boss isn't nice, but we saw him as number one.
The relationship that was established between the W56 and the friendship group was not one way. Very soon, the friends started asking for help.
At the most prosaic level, they asked for essentially logistical assistance. Then they requested industrial quantities of fruit. Then they needed metals in industrial quantities as usual, but also strange minerals like strontium and barium nitrate, which were very difficult to find since back then they served no useful purpose at all. Today, it has applications in telecameras, circuits like that, but in those days, we had absolutely no idea what it might be used for.
To unload the cargo from the trucks, including fruit, the W56 used teleporting.
They proved they could teleport anything, even people, without any particular problem. They took the whole load of fruit and teleported it, which means that the operation only lasted a few seconds.
Of course, all this meant that no outsider could watch the unloading. This often forced Bruno and Giancarlo to invent excuses so the truck drivers arriving with a load wouldn't become suspicious. They usually explained that a team of professional workers would be coming soon to transfer the goods by other means. So, while Bruno invited the driver to some nearby bar to wait for the phantom workers, Giancarlo stood watch over the truck. Obviously, the places where they met were chosen in advance. The unloading operation lasted just a few seconds, so when Bruno and the truck driver came back, it was already over. The truck driver was always impressed by the speed and cleanliness of the work. Buying such large quantities and so many varieties of materials was very expensive. Sometimes it was the friends who paid part of the cost, or all of it, maybe in their usual way. But most of the time, it wasn't like that, which created more than a few problems.
Essentially, the vast majority of the expenses were paid by Bruno. In other words, he took the trouble of paying, the others took part if and when they could.
Throughout this story, definitely out of the ordinary, it seems even more absurd that despite their astonishing technological capabilities, the W56 needed help to get food or other materials. Not to mention the money that materialized out of nowhere.
Of course, they could get whatever they wanted without the slightest problem. As I said, their technology was advanced. In my opinion, putting on this little show served to keep the sense of cohesion tight.
In fact, the friends explained that to be able to operate among us, humans had to express their goodwill in a concrete way too. They said, "Help us to help you." Lots of people who were part of the friendship story saw W56 flying saucers. These sightings were almost always by appointment. The W56 indicated the place, date, and time, so the humans were able to get organized with film equipment.
Same thing in Menger. When he would go to the field locations, field location 1, field location 2, same thing. So that's great.
Sometimes the photos were also published. The series of a flying saucer over Milan, photographed by Gaspare de Lama, ended up in Domenica del Corriere in the second issue of April 1962. The sighting had taken place at the end of February of the same year. The eyewitnesses were Gaspare de Lama, Bruno Samaciccia, and journalist Bruno Ghibaudi, at the time author of numerous articles on UFOs, and one of the first journalists to seriously address the issue.
When we were on my balcony in Piazza Giulio Cesare in Milan, when that saucer was photographed, that's why he later wrote the article in the Domenica del Corriere. Besides Bruno, he was present too.
Obviously, only now, after the revelations of Professor Breccia and Gaspare de Lama, can we know what really revolved around that seemingly chance occurrence. But how much weight should we give to these claims? Gaspare still remembers one of the sightings perfectly. It happened in the countryside of Treno near Milan. There are still excellent quality photos and a film clip more deteriorated because of the decades that have passed. The W56 asked Gaspare himself to choose the place.
I went back to Bruno and said, "That's the place I chose." And then he told me, "Go buy some film, put it in the camera." And I said, "But no, you put it in." No, you have to do everything. I said, "Okay." I put the film in the camera and filmed for a good 2 minutes. He wanted me to take the film out of the camera. I put it in my pocket and took it to Ferrania, which was then in Via Mattiotti, to have it developed. When I went to get it, I took it home and saw the film clip of this beautiful flying saucer that was going up and down almost to the ground.
On top of the saucer, you see a dark area, which the W56 explained was a particular effect of condensation caused by the energy of the flying saucer. Some of the photos of the series taken in the Treno countryside were lost, but those that remain would provide evidence of the incredible sighting experienced by Gaspare de Lama and Bruno Samaciccia. While returning to Milan, the saucer followed
ships. I'm actually going to do a whole separate section. We actually have a video I did with Evan on how these ships work. The W56 ships, they're iron, and they're held together with a field, and when they don't need them anymore, they just drop the field and the thing falls apart. But they're quite different from the ones that we fly on Era. And these ships they're using here, they're considered like throwaway. They didn't really go interstellar. They did, you could, but they didn't really. But the propulsion systems they're fairly similar with these ships. I mean, all these ships pretty much. I mean, unless you're getting into some plasma stuff and all that. But for your regular, I call them the 4D, 5D humanoid type ETs, the ship's propulsion systems are fairly similar. So the beam ships, all these kinds of things like that. However, the difference is with the W56 ships is that they're largely made of iron.
for a stretch. Sammachicha took one more shot, the last of the 12 exposures on the roll.
Bruno ha scattato dalla
Bruno took a photo of the same flying saucer, which had apparently reappeared there to follow us or to give us a last farewell.
The particular phenomenon of condensation does not appear in this shot. This important series of documents was analyzed to evaluate any possible falsification. Back then, digital technologies didn't exist, so it was very difficult to produce high-quality forgeries.
I can't stress that enough. You know, it was very difficult to create fake. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you didn't have CGI, you didn't have digital photography. So extremely difficult. Who did often create fakes was the, you know, the Sith, the CIA, all those people. They would oftentimes, because the film had to be developed, they would interfere with that. They would take the film, they would destroy the film, or they would actually insert or produce their own fakes. So you would have legit footage like this, and then you would have the bad guys creating fakes and putting that out in the media and trying to, just like what they're doing now. They haven't changed. They want to create, they create a bunch of fakes, they create a bunch of those people, they promote them, they put them forward, and then they try to take the whole thing down that way. They were doing the same thing with the crop circles and again with footage of UFOs. But yeah, good luck to them, right?
I accurately and specifically analyzed the photographic material concerning the friendship case. I didn't find any evidence of forgery, such as a small-scale model suspended by cables, superimposed images, processing with 3D graphics.
From the images of the analyses that were made, I can confirm that the object was quite large. We're talking roughly 4 to 5 meters around. And this also agrees with the testimonies of the people I spoke with. And the object is precisely inserted into this context of lights, shadows. Therefore, it is perfectly placed in its environmental context.
As part of the friendship case, an enormous amount of photographic material and film clips about flying saucers was produced. Much has been distributed indiscriminately. Much has been lost, and even stolen. And much more is still locked in the drawers of other unknown participants who don't want to make themselves known. However, there's enough material available to give us an idea of just how incredible the events would have been. All the material that is known to date is thanks to Gaspare de Lama and Stefano Breccia.
In the friendship case, there were literally hundreds of photos, videos, audio recordings, and that's about it, since technology ended there at the time.
Over time, friendship would involve other people who took part in this incredible experience in various ways. Everybody had the opportunity to see the phenomena, and many had the chance to personally meet the W56. The number and kinds of individuals involved, in Italy alone, would be considerable.
I have a file where there are the names of, I think, 120 people who were involved in this story in some way. Those are the people I'm aware of, but who knows how many others there are that I don't know about. The people involved in friendship came from all walks of life. There was a cross-section of normal society. Friendship was also active in other countries, in France, Switzerland, Germany, particularly in Germany, but also in Siberia, in Argentina, and who knows how many other places, in Australia.
As we've seen, teleportation was one of the most impressive technological capabilities the Friends had. This system was used to materialize and dematerialize objects of various sorts, and even slips of paper with the written answers to questions asked by those who were present at the meetings.
Their technology is infinite. There were so many things I saw. The ones I remember the most were the teleports.
Si formava una mezz'aria
Their film reels, or even sometimes written notes or film clips of flying saucers that we would then watch just came from above. They materialized in midair in the room. Sometimes they came from the floor and tapped me under the chair. Sometimes I saw them materialize in the air.
Along with teleportation, some of the most frequent phenomena were communications between the friends and the humans through normal radios. This was also done their way.
Their technology was virtually indistinguishable from magic. For example, if I took two identical radios tuned into the same frequency and put them side by side awaiting their message could be heard on one radio while the other radio continued its normal broadcast as if nothing was happening. So,
oh, that worked. I mean, of course, that's how the bad guys work now too.
obviously insane amounts of energy involved and directivity just as crazy.
So I bought myself one of those transistor radios. Bruno told me to put it there on the cabinet. In 5 minutes, they'll prepare it for you.
Dopo 5 minuti è uscito un bello schioppo, una certa fiammata.
In fact, after 5 minutes, there was a big crack. A sort of greenish flame came out, and Bruno said, "There, now it's ready." And they immediately greeted me through the radio. Sigir. And I could also change the frequencies. The broadcast continued.
Some of these communications were also recorded with the reel-to-reel devices existing then. Gaspare still owns some of the tapes. For the first time after so many years, the voice of the W56 is made public.
Cari amici, cari figlioli, siate certi di noi, poiché nessuno tra noi vacillerà. Voi siate uniti, uniti, uniti e sopportate le vostre debolezze reciproche, lottando e migliorando come uomini e come nostri cari amici. Il nostro mondo per voi cari non è facile a capire. Questo è naturale, ma con l'affetto e la fiducia potrete ugualmente stare vicino ai nostri cuori aperti a voi per comprenderci di più. Un abbraccio fatto di caldo affetto e di pura amicizia dal vostro Sigir.
You know, and it's unfortunate. I mean, you just, are the Terrans all coming together? No. I mean, no. Like I said, personally, I don't see that ever happening. And without that, I don't understand it. Number one, I never understood them, but as Sigir was saying there, what do ETs sound like? They sound like we're all ETs. If they're humanoids, then they sound like people. They have all people voices. But Sigir tried to tell them the only way they're going to survive, and ultimately nothing really. We know, right? Are the humans sticking together? No, and they never did. And the syndicate was able to come in and destroy that base in Pescara, sadly.
Radios weren't the only communication tools used. Sometimes the friends would also insert themselves into normal television programs.
I remember once there was a film.
Si è interrotto il film e si sono visti dei...
And it was interrupted and their saucers were seen flying.
Intanto sotto...
While in the background their voices, maybe only greeting us that time.
A fourth witness of the extraordinary events of friendship who accepted Breccia's invitation to speak is the professor of design Paolo Di Girolamo. His experience was very brief. He met the friendship group only a couple of times. Always a ufology enthusiast, Di Girolamo knew Consul Alberto Parago and journalist Bruno Ghibaldi personally. And it was precisely the latter to put him in touch with Bruno Samaciccia in Pescara. Paolo had with him the letter he'd written for the W56. And he welcomed me into a kind of living room, so to speak. I enter, I lay this letter on the console, and I sit down on the sofa. At one point, Bruno Sammachicha says, "We should be getting some news. Let's see." He takes this radio and turns it on. The radio was playing music, and then we hear a piercing whistle. Really a very loud hissing sound. I hear Sigir here. Hello, Paolo. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all. 3 times. Then another voice says, "Let's get the goods." Now, the goods, in my opinion, had to be a big parcel Sammachicha had taken, all lined in black and placed on top of the television set. A very loud crackle, a real blinding purple flash, just like that. And then...
I'm just going to say, so when he placed the stuff that they needed there, they teleported it and they heard a crackle. We're going to have Jerry Wills on, knock on wood, all goes well. And Jerry Wills talked about a visitor that he had met, and this guy was able to teleport himself. And he says he heard this like crinkling sound, like, you know, like plastic crinkling of a package, you know. And here it is here also, that the teleportation creates that crinkle sound.
There was nothing. After this event, which leaves Paolo speechless, the group goes out into the street. And when they come back inside, Paolo realizes that his letter, which he'd left on the table, was gone. For a moment, they talk about who might have taken it, but nobody understands. Sammachicha's wife also denies touching it. At that point, Bruno urges everyone to go out into the street again. There wasn't a soul in sight at all. Around midnight, or something like that. At a certain point, I feel something falls on my head. A little piece of paper all folded up. It was a scorched envelope. Open, and it was the letter I'd left on the console. To make the phenomena possible, or to amplify them, including telepathy, which they made wide use of, the W56 used devices that were called Nuclei. They could be placed in objects, in rooms, or even in the bodies of living creatures, including people.
Questi nuclei erano per loro una...
These nuclei were a necessary thing for them. Like if I want to receive a phone call from you, I need to have a phone at my house.
Bruno had a German shepherd named Dick. The friends told Bruno that the dog would play an important role in the contacts and in certain operations that called for the help of the humans. He would become a sort of amplifying antenna. So they asked Sammachicha to bring the dog to the seaside. At their command, which came by telepathy, Dick was made to go into the water. At that point, the friends would treat the dog, placing Nuclei under his paws. In fact, Dick was almost always with Bruno. In one of the film clips that have come to light, we see him looking out of the window while Bruno is filming a UFO circling over the palazzos of Milan, where Bruno lived for a while. It isn't the only ufological document made in Milan. One of the more controversial pieces of information that the W56 gave to their human friends concerned a conflict with an artificial race called Weirdos, but which Sammachicha renamed with the term CTR, which was the contraction of the word contraries.
One of the strange things about the friendship stories is the existence of enemies, the famous contraries, the CTR. While the W56 were ethical, these others were materialistic, virtually the opposite of the W56 in every way. They didn't speak of war, but of conflict. And one reason they were here was to keep the CTR in check.
The Friends called them science worshippers, saying the CTR were creatures without scruples. And their greatest fear was that we humans were following the same path the CTR had already covered. For the W56, the feelings of friendship...
I'll put the link. This is a bit longer. It's already been quite a while. I'll just put the link, you can finish it. So most of the juicy stuff is in there, but yeah, at the end, I'll leave you with the CTR because that's where the humans are headed. So you know, we can just hope that this race doesn't go that route. There's a lot of races have gone that route. So we do our best, and we've been doing our best for many decades now. And unfortunately, we haven't made a lot of ground in, and this is why they talk about things like interference and stuff like that. Why can't the ET just come in and change stuff? Because you can't change the nature of somebody. You can't, like the CTRs. I mean, you're not going to make something like that into something that it's not. If you hold a snake and you scare the snake, it's going to bite you, right? And that's what you got here. And I know a lot of people are rubbed the wrong way with that, but you know, the fact of the matter is that the beings on this planet are service to self, and they don't really care about the other beings on this planet. Look at the way they treat, the way they treat animals, of course, the way they treat trees and nature, and the way they destroy things. And then of course a lot of your Native American groups mention this, your indigenous groups, like, you know, the Aborigines, about the you know, use and abuse mentality. That's not just an Earth-Terran thing. That has happened on other planets. There are a lot of planets where the beings that live on that planet have destroyed their planet. They don't care. It's not of interest to them. It's just a way of being. And all we're trying to do here is to try to stop that from happening. Like I said, at this point, I don't know. I mean, you know, magic can happen, but I just don't see the race on this planet doing anything towards being less militant, less service to self, less greedy. You can't even go into anywhere, really. You can't even drive down the street without conflict, you know. There's no camaraderie, you know, you have homeless people, you have sick people, you know, it's just, there's no real global compassion for one person over another. And if you just even look at a basic work environment, there's always one person that feels like they are somehow something just floated on its feather that they are privileged to having more than others. You know, why would a boss, and if you ask your average person, we don't even have the term for boss, but humans like this idea of hierarchy. That's Ray Draco. The society here is very alpha draconian. But the boss makes more money than other people that work in the place because they are somehow entitled to a better life than other people. That's really what you're saying. It's like, oh, I deserve more. But if you even tried to describe this to people, wouldn't it be better if everyone was living in comfort and happy and having a wonderful life and having all the things that they need? Not what you greed, but what you need. This is a concept too that Terrans, because they are service to self, don't understand. You have what you need, but they have so much greed and a philosophy of greed that I don't know how you can take that down. It's innate in them. And in all of their relationships, it's all about manipulation. It's all about lack of trust. It's all about no safety. It's all about, even we talked about this before and other things, concepts like marriage, which is basically a legal document of you know, enslavement between two people. You shouldn't need a document to have a relationship with someone. But try to explain that to your average person. They think that they need this document because the other person is going to run away. It's like, that's not love. That's enslavement. And it's all about fear and lack and all these things, which are very Draco. So as I said, just look at the society that you're living in. Nothing in this society is based upon love, innocence, beauty, and camaraderie, or as Sigir says, unity. So I'll leave it with that. Anyway, all we can hope is we get teleported out of here when I can't give a prophecy like that these people are going to crash and burn, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. So as always, once I find out how to, I got the light coming in here, so I can't see. I can't see where the where the end is. Where is my little arrow that I can end this with? There it is. There we go. Can't see crap with the sunlight. As always, we'll see you upstairs.